The woman in seat 12A, Kayla Mitchell, gazed out of the airplane window, her eyes scanning the horizon as the jet glided effortlessly through the clouds. The gentle hum of the engines was a calming backdrop to her thoughts. She wasn't just traveling for leisure. Her business commitments had brought her here, but the flight was supposed to offer her a moment of solitude before she dove back into work. Kayla was not a woman who sought attention. Her husband, Richard Mitchell, was a name that carried weight in the aviation industry. As the owner of one of the largest airlines in the world, Richard was a figure of both respect and authority. Kayla, however, had made it a point to live life on her terms, simple, private, and grounded. She never flaunted her position or her husband's influence. On flights like this one, she preferred blending into the background, just another face in the sea of passengers. The cabin was bustling with the usual chaos of air travel. Families wrangled children, business people fiddled with laptops, and flight attendants weaved through the aisles, issuing practiced smiles as they attended to passengers. Kayla sat quietly in seat 12A, dressed in a plain cardigan and jeans, her only accessory a well-worn book resting on her lap. To anyone passing by, she was simply another traveler. Her peaceful moment, however, was about to be disrupted. Tiffany Lawson, a flight attendant known among her colleagues for her sharp tongue and brisk demeanor, strode confidently through the cabin. Tiffany took her job seriously, but not in the way one might hope. She prided herself on maintaining order, but her methods often involved unnecessary condescension, particularly toward those she deemed unworthy of her time. When Tiffany's gaze landed on Kayla, her eyes narrowed ever so slightly. The woman in 12 didn't fit the profile of someone Tiffany felt the need to impress. There was no designer handbag, no flashy jewelry, just a quiet woman absorbed in her book. To Tiffany, this meant one thing: Kayla was insignificant. As Tiffany reached Kayla's row, she stopped abruptly. Her practiced smile faltered into a thin line as she leaned slightly toward Kayla. "Ma'am," she said, her tone clipped, "the seatbelt sign has been on for a while. You should have buckled up by now." Kayla looked up, startled by the abruptness. She hadn't noticed the light turning on, lost as she was in the narrative of her book. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said softly, fastening the belt. She offered a polite smile, hoping to diffuse whatever tension seemed to be brewing. But Tiffany wasn't satisfied. "This isn't optional," she added, her voice growing sharper. "We have rules for a reason." Kayla blinked, surprised by the unnecessary hostility. She nodded again, this time choosing not to respond. Years of navigating complex business negotiations had taught her the value of remaining calm in the face of unwarranted aggression. However, she couldn't ignore the burning discomfort spreading through her chest. It wasn't just the tone Tiffany used. It was the implication behind her words, the judgment in her eyes. Tiffany lingered a moment longer, as if waiting for a reaction, before finally moving on. Kayla exhaled slowly, her fingers tightening around her book. She could feel the weight of eyes on her. Other passengers had noticed the interaction, some with curiosity, others with discomfort. Kayla turned back to the window, pretending to admire the view, but her mind was racing. This wasn't the first time she had encountered someone like Tiffany. People often made assumptions about her based on her appearance, never imagining that beneath her unassuming exterior was a woman of substantial influence. It was a reality she had learned to navigate with grace, but this time, something felt different. This time, she wasn't just a passenger enduring a moment of rudeness. This time, she was the wife of the man who owned this very airline. Kayla reached for her phone, her fingers hovering over the screen as she debated her next move. She wasn't one to cause a scene, but she also couldn't ignore the growing feeling of indignation. Finally, she typed a short message to Richard. "I'm on my flight. Everything is fine, but I just had an unpleasant encounter with a flight attendant. It's nothing major, but it's left me feeling pretty disrespected. Just thought you should know." She hesitated for a moment before hitting send. Richard was in the middle of a critical meeting, but she knew he would want to hear about this. Not because she needed him to intervene, but because she knew he would understand how deeply moments like these affected her. For Richard, this wasn't just about his wife. It was about the culture of the airline he had worked so hard to build. As the flight continued, Kayla tried to focus on her book, but Tiffany's words lingered in her mind. The incident had been minor, but the implications were much larger. How many other passengers had experienced this kind of treatment? How many people had been judged, dismissed, or humiliated simply because someone assumed they weren't important? Meanwhile, Tiffany continued her rounds, oblivious to the storm she had unknowingly set in motion. To her, Kayla was already forgotten, a fleeting interaction in a long day of work. She didn't notice the subtle shift in the atmosphere or the way a few passengers now regarded her with quiet disapproval. She didn't realize that the woman she had dismissed so casually was anything but ordinary. As the plane began its descent, Kayla felt a renewed sense of resolve. This wasn't just about her, not anymore. This was about every passenger who had ever been treated as though they were invisible, as though their value could be measured by their appearance or the weight of their luggage. Kayla wasn't seeking revenge. She was seeking change. Little did Tiffany know, the quiet woman in seat 12A was about to teach her, and the entire airline, a lesson in humility, respect, and the true meaning of power. The calm before the storm. As the airplane began its steady descent, the city lights twinkling below like a galaxy of stars, Kayla Mitchell leaned back in her seat, her mind a mix of calm determination and growing unease. Her message to Richard had gone unanswered, which was unusual. Normally, he replied to her within minutes, no matter how busy he was. She wondered if she had done the right thing by sending it. Part of her felt like she was overreacting. After all, Tiffany's rudeness was nothing new in the world of travel. Everyone had bad days, and maybe this was just one of those for Tiffany. Yet there was something deeper that Kayla couldn't ignore. The sting of being treated as if she didn't matter gnawed at her. And not just for herself. What about the other passengers? The ones who didn't have the power to speak up or the ear of someone like Richard Mitchell. By the time the plane touched down smoothly on the tarmac, Kayla had made a decision. She wasn't looking for an apology or retribution. She wanted understanding, a fundamental change in the way people were treated. If Tiffany's behavior was any indication of the airline's broader culture, then there was work to be done, and she was uniquely positioned to ensure it happened. The seatbelt sign pinged off, and passengers began bustling to retrieve their overhead bags, eager to disembark. Kayla stayed seated, her phone buzzing in her lap. She glanced at the screen and saw a message from Richard. Just landed myself. We'll talk soon. Stay calm, love. This will be handled properly. The reassurance in his words made her smile faintly, but her resolve didn't waver. As much as she trusted Richard to address the issue, she knew that part of the responsibility lay with her. She couldn't just pass this off to him. This was her moment to make a statement, not just as his wife, but as a person who believed in respect and dignity for all. Kayla watched as the line of passengers shuffled forward, many glancing at their watches or phones, anxious to get on with their day. She remained seated, her presence quiet but purposeful. Tiffany stood near the exit, her demeanor still exuding a mix of professional detachment and barely concealed impatience. She offered perfunctory smiles and scripted farewells to each passenger, her earlier interaction with Kayla seemingly forgotten. But Kayla hadn't forgotten. She waited until the last of the passengers had filed past before rising from her seat. As she moved toward the exit, her steps measured and deliberate, Tiffany noticed her and immediately stiffened. There was a flicker of recognition in her eyes, though she masked it quickly. "Have a good day, ma'am," Tiffany said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Kayla stopped, turning to face her fully. The other flight attendants exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the tension but unsure of its source. "I will," Kayla said evenly. "But before I go, I need to say something." Tiffany's smile faltered. "Of course," she said, her tone wary. "I'm not here to argue or cause a scene." Kayla began, her voice calm but firm. But I want you to think about how you treated me today. I don't know if it was a bad day or if you just assumed I wasn't worth your time, but that kind of behavior doesn't belong here or anywhere." Tiffany blinked, momentarily caught off guard. If I came off as rude, I apologize," she said, her voice tight. "It wasn't intentional." Kayla's gaze didn't waver. Intentional or not, it happened. And it's not just about me. It's about how you see people. You looked at me and decided I wasn't important enough to treat with respect. That's the problem. The other flight attendants shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between Kayla and Tiffany. The pilot, who had stepped out of the cockpit, paused to listen, his expression curious. "I hope you'll take some time to think about that," Kayla concluded, "because you never know who you're talking to or the impact your words might have." With that, she turned and walked away, her posture straight, her head held high. Tiffany stood frozen, her face a mix of embarrassment and disbelief. She opened her mouth as if to respond but found no words. As Kayla stepped off the plane and into the bustling jetway, she felt a wave of mixed emotions: relief, resolve, and a lingering sense of unease. The confrontation had been necessary, but it wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The airport was its usual chaos of rushing passengers, echoing announcements, and the hum of luggage wheels on polished floors. Kayla moved through it with purpose, her phone buzzing incessantly. By the time she reached the car waiting to take her to her hotel, she had missed 3 calls from Richard. She slid into the back seat, her driver nodding politely before pulling into the stream of traffic. Kayla returned Richard's call immediately. "Hey," she said, her voice steady. "Kayla," Richard began, his tone calm but edged with concern. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she assured him. "It wasn't about me, Richard. Not really. It's about what that interaction represents." There was a pause on the other end before Richard sighed. "I've already spoken to the senior staff. They'll handle it. But I want to hear everything from you first." Kayla recounted the incident in detail, her voice steady but impassioned. Richard listened intently, his occasional murmurs of acknowledgement letting her know he was taking it all in. "I'll admit, I'm angry," Richard said when she finished. "Not just because of how she treated you, but because this reflects on the culture we've built, or failed to build. If one person feels empowered to act this way, it means others might too." "I thought the same," Kayla said. "That's why I couldn't just let it go. This isn't about one flight attendant. It's about the bigger picture." Richard was silent for a moment, then said, "I have an idea, but I need you to trust me on this. I want to make a public example, not to punish her, but to send a message about what we stand for as a company." Kayla frowned slightly. "What kind of example?" "You'll see," Richard said cryptically. "But I promise it will be done with respect. I'll make sure this becomes a lesson for everyone involved, not just Tiffany." Kayla sighed, leaning back in her seat. She trusted Richard implicitly, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. As the city skyline came into view, she stared out the window, her mind racing. This wasn't just about an airline or a single flight attendant. It was about humanity, empathy, and the small but significant ways people could make each other's lives better or worse. Kayla wasn't sure what Richard had planned, but she knew one thing for certain. The journey that began in seat 12A was far from over. The wake-up call. The following morning, Kayla woke up to the soft glow of sunlight streaming through her hotel room window. Despite the plush comfort of her surroundings, she had barely slept. Her conversation with Richard lingered in her mind, and she couldn't shake the weight of what had transpired on the flight. It wasn't just about Tiffany. It was about something larger, something systemic. She sipped her coffee as her phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a notification. Internal memo. Leadership conference. All staff meeting. The subject line intrigued her. It was from the corporate communications team at Richard's Airline, addressed to all employees. Kayla's curiosity deepened when Richard's name appeared as the sender of the memo. Internal memo. From Richard Mitchell, CEO. 2. All employees. Subject: A new chapter of respect and excellence. Dear team, over the past few years, we've built this airline on a foundation of customer service, professionalism, and integrity. However, recent events have reminded me that even the strongest foundations can develop cracks. Today, we take a step to ensure those cracks are addressed, not patched, but repaired permanently. I'm calling for a company-wide leadership conference, mandatory for all employees, to discuss the principles of respect, empathy, and accountability in our service culture. This isn't just another meeting. It's an opportunity for us to reflect on our values and recommit to treating every person, customer, or colleague with the dignity they deserve. We are more than an airline. We are a community, and in our community, everyone matters. Your attendance is not just required, it's essential. I look forward to seeing you there. Sincerely, Richard Mitchell. Kayla's lips curled into a small smile. Richard wasn't wasting any time. She knew he had always taken pride in creating a customer-first culture at the airline, and this was his way of making a statement, not only to Tiffany but to everyone who represented the company. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Richard. "Good morning, love," he said, his voice warm but businesslike. "Good morning," she replied. "I saw your memo. It's impressive." "It's necessary," Richard said firmly. "This isn't about embarrassing anyone or pointing fingers. It's about fixing a culture that clearly needs improvement." Kayla nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "Do you think they'll take it seriously?" "They'll have to," he said. "I've also arranged for a series of training sessions for all frontline staff. Every single employee will go through a program focused on empathy, inclusion, and respect. This isn't optional." Kayla smiled, proud of his proactive approach. "I think that's a great start. But there's one more thing," Richard added, his tone shifting. "I need you to be part of this." Kayla blinked in surprise. "Me? What do you mean?" "I want you to attend the conference," he explained. "Not as my wife, but as a guest speaker. You have a unique perspective, Kayla. You've experienced firsthand what it feels like to be dismissed and judged. Your story could make a real impact." Kayla's heart raced. She wasn't a public speaker by nature, and the idea of addressing a room full of strangers, even employees of the company she and Richard had built, felt daunting. But she also knew he was right. If she wanted to be part of the solution, this was her chance. "All right," she said after a pause. "I'll do it." The conference. 2 weeks later, Kayla found herself standing backstage at the airline's headquarters, her heart pounding as she listened to the murmur of voices beyond the curtain. The leadership conference had drawn hundreds of employees, from pilots and flight attendants to corporate executives. The air buzzed with anticipation. Richard stepped up beside her, dressed sharply in a tailored suit. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You'll be great," he said. "Just speak from the heart." Kayla nodded, drawing a deep breath as the event coordinator gestured for her to step forward. The room fell silent as she walked onto the stage, the spotlight bright and intimidating. She scanned the sea of faces, many of them curious, some skeptical. In the front row, Tiffany sat stiffly, her expression unreadable. "Good morning," Kayla began, her voice steady despite the nerves. "I want to start by thanking each of you for being here. My name is Kayla Mitchell. Some of you may know me as Richard's wife. But today, I'm here as a passenger, someone who experienced what it feels like to be dismissed and disrespected." She paused, letting her words sink in. 2 weeks ago, I was on a flight, just like any other traveler. I was quietly reading a book, minding my own business, when an interaction with one of your colleagues left me feeling humiliated and invisible. At first, I thought it was just about me. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't. It was about a culture that allows us to make snap judgments about people based on how they look or what we assume about them. The room was silent, every eye fixed on her. "I'm not here to name names or assign blame," she continued. I'm here because I believe we can be better. This airline has always prided itself on being customer-focused, but being focused on people isn't just about policies and procedures. It's about how we treat every single person we encounter. She looked directly at Tiffany, whose face had turned pale. We're all human, Kayla said, her voice softening. We all have bad days, but kindness and respect don't cost us anything. In fact, they often pay dividends we can't even imagine. She stepped back, the room erupting into applause as she finished. Kayla's heart swelled with a mix of relief and pride. She had spoken her truth, and now it was up to the audience to carry it forward. Aftermath. Following the conference, the airline implemented a new program called Moments That Matter, which focused on creating meaningful interactions between employees and customers. The initiative included regular workshops, anonymous feedback channels, and recognition programs for exemplary behavior. As for Tiffany, her story became a cautionary tale within the company. She completed the new training program, and though she initially struggled with the scrutiny, she eventually grew from the experience. Months later, she approached Kayla privately to apologize, not just for her behavior, but for the assumptions she had made. I didn't see you for who you really were, Tiffany admitted. But that's no excuse. I've learned a lot, and I hope to keep improving. Kayla accepted the apology with grace, knowing that true change took time and effort. In her heart, she believed that the seeds of respect and understanding planted during the conference would continue to grow. The flight from 2 weeks ago had become more than just a journey. It was a turning point. Kayla hadn't set out to change an airline's culture, but her decision to speak up had sparked a movement. And as she boarded another plane, this time greeted warmly by the staff, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't about the power she held or the influence of her husband's name. It was about the simple but profound belief that everyone, regardless of their status or appearance, deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. And in her eyes, that was a flight worth taking every time. The ripple effect. Kayla's words at the leadership conference echoed far beyond the walls of the airline's headquarters. In the days and weeks that followed, her story began to spread, not as a tale of outrage, but as an example of quiet power and the importance of empathy. Employees who had attended the conference shared their impressions with colleagues, and soon, Kayla's message became a talking point across the company. For Kayla, the aftermath brought mixed emotions. On one hand, she was glad that her experience had sparked change. On the other, she felt a quiet pressure, an awareness that her actions had set something in motion that was now much larger than herself. As she returned to her daily life, she couldn't help but wonder, would the changes stick? Or would this moment of introspection fade as the realities of corporate life took over? The employee perspective. At the heart of the airline, the ripple effect was already taking shape. For flight attendants like Maria Sanchez, the conference had been an eye-opener. Maria had worked for the airline for over a decade, and though she prided herself on her customer service, she realized during Kayla's speech that she too had fallen into habits of judgment and assumption. I remember watching her on stage, Maria later told her colleagues during one of the new empathy workshops. And I thought to myself, how many times have I dismissed someone without realizing it? It's easy to get caught up in the routine, but that's not an excuse. The workshops, part of the newly launched Moments That Matter initiative, encouraged employees to share their experiences and reflect on how they interacted with passengers. The program emphasized that every passenger's story was unique, even if it wasn't immediately visible. It's not just about being polite, Maria explained. It's about being present, taking a moment to see the person in front of you, not just the seat number. Tiffany's turning point. For Tiffany Lawson, the fallout from the conference had been more personal. She couldn't shake the memory of Kayla's calm but piercing words. The realization that she had treated the owner's wife poorly was embarrassing, but it was the broader implications that haunted her. If she had made assumptions about Kayla, how many other passengers had she treated the same way? The company's new training program was mandatory for all employees, but Tiffany approached it with a mix of dread and determination. The sessions were interactive, forcing participants to step into the shoes of passengers with different backgrounds and needs. There were simulations where flight attendants had to manage scenarios involving nervous flyers, passengers with disabilities, and even those who were simply having a bad day. One exercise in particular stood out to Tiffany. The facilitator asked each participant to think of a time when they had felt dismissed or invisible. For Tiffany, a memory from her early days as a flight attendant came rushing back. She had been new, nervous, and eager to prove herself, but her supervisor at the time had brushed off her questions with a tone that made her feel small. "I think I forgot how that felt," Tiffany admitted during the session. "And somewhere along the way, I became the person who makes others feel that way. I didn't even realize it." By the end of the training, Tiffany felt a renewed sense of purpose. She made a personal commitment to approach her job with more empathy and to be a source of support, not judgment, for both passengers and her colleagues. A culture shift. The impact of the Moments That Matter program extended beyond frontline employees. At the corporate level, executives began re-examining policies and practices to ensure they aligned with the values of respect and inclusion. Richard Mitchell himself led the charge, holding weekly meetings with department heads to track progress and gather feedback. One significant change was the introduction of anonymous passenger feedback forms, accessible both in-flight and online. These forms allowed passengers to share their experiences directly with the company, whether positive or negative. The data collected was used not just to address individual issues, but to identify broader patterns and areas for improvement. "It's not enough to talk about change," Richard said during one of the executive meetings. "We have to listen. To our employees, to our passengers, to everyone who interacts with our brand. This isn't a one-time fix. It's an ongoing commitment." The airline also launched a recognition program called Above and Beyond, which celebrated employees who exemplified the company's values. Each month, passengers and coworkers could nominate individuals who had made a positive impact. Winners received both public recognition and tangible rewards, reinforcing the message that kindness and professionalism were not only expected but celebrated. The passenger experience. The changes didn't go unnoticed by passengers. Frequent flyer James O'Connor, a business consultant who had been traveling with the airline for years, remarked on the difference during a recent flight. "I used to feel like just another body in a seat," he said. "But now, the staff actually engage with you. They ask how you're doing, if there's anything they can do to make your trip better. It's small stuff, but it makes a big difference." For Kayla, hearing stories like James was the most rewarding part of the journey. Though she hadn't sought recognition for her role in sparking these changes, passengers and employees alike began to see her as a symbol of what the airline stood for, not just a transportation company, but a community built on mutual respect. An unexpected reunion. Months after the conference, Kayla found herself on another flight. This time, she was headed to a small town for a personal retreat. As she boarded the plane, she recognized Tiffany among the flight attendants. Their eyes met briefly, and Tiffany offered a warm, genuine smile. "Mrs. Mitchell," Tiffany said as Kayla settled into her seat, "it's good to see you again." Kayla returned the smile. "Please, call me Kayla." Tiffany hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, "not just for what you said at the conference, but for what it's meant for all of us. I've learned so much, and I hope it shows." "It does," Kayla replied softly. "And thank you for being open to change. That's not always easy." As Tiffany moved down the aisle to assist other passengers, Kayla felt a sense of closure. The journey that had begun with a moment of humiliation had come full circle, transforming not just an airline, but the people within it. The bigger picture. For Kayla, the experience reinforced a powerful truth. Change doesn't always start with grand gestures or sweeping reforms. Sometimes it begins with a single voice, a quiet moment of standing up for what's right. And while the road ahead would always have challenges, she knew that every step taken toward kindness and understanding was a step worth taking. As the plane ascended into the clouds, Kayla glanced out the window, a sense of peace washing over her. This wasn't just about one flight or one airline. It was about the ripple effect, the idea that one action, no matter how small, could inspire a wave of transformation. And as she watched the horizon stretch out before her, she felt hopeful for the future, knowing that change was in the air. A new horizon. The weeks that followed the moments, that Matter Progress Review felt like a turning point, not just for the airline, but for Kayla Mitchell as well. What had started as a deeply personal moment of indignation had grown into a movement that touched countless lives. Yet, as Kayla walked into her office one crisp morning, she couldn't help but feel that her work wasn't done. Something inside her told her there was more to do, that this change could extend even further. She settled at her desk, her mind wandering as she glanced at the emails piling up on her screen. Her thoughts returned to the countless stories she'd heard during the workshops, the conference, and the review. Each one had been a reminder of how easily people could feel invisible, dismissed, or undervalued. And while she was proud of the progress the airline had made, she knew the challenge lay in maintaining that momentum, and perhaps even expanding it beyond the confines of the company. An unexpected email. As she sifted through her inbox, one email caught her eye. It was from Amara, the young flight attendant who had shared her story about comforting a grieving passenger. The subject line read, "A question about the bigger picture." Kayla clicked it open, curious. "Dear Mrs. Mitchell, I hope this email finds you well. I wanted to thank you again for your words at the conference and for everything you've done to inspire change within the airline. It's been an incredible experience to see how much of a difference empathy can make, not just for our passengers, but for all of us as employees. I've been thinking a lot about what you said at the meeting, about how small gestures can create a ripple effect. I wanted to ask, do you think this idea could extend beyond our company? Could we inspire a broader movement, one that encourages kindness and respect in all aspects of life, not just in the air? I know it's a big idea, but I believe we have the power to do something extraordinary. Please let me know if you'd be open to discussing this further. Warm regards, Amara." Kayla leaned back in her chair, the words stirring something deep within her. Amara's question was bold, but it resonated. Why stop at the airline? Why not take the lessons they'd learned and share them with the world? The thought was both exhilarating and daunting. She closed her laptop, her mind buzzing with possibilities. The proposal. Later that evening, over dinner with Richard, Kayla shared Amara's email. As she spoke, her husband listened intently, his expression thoughtful. "You've got something here," Richard said after she finished. "A real opportunity to create lasting change, not just for our company, but on a much larger scale. What are you thinking?" Kayla hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. "I'm thinking we could launch an initiative, a global campaign focused on kindness, empathy, and respect. We could start with partnerships in the travel industry, but eventually it could extend to schools, workplaces, and communities. It's ambitious, but I believe it could work." Richard nodded slowly. "You'd be the perfect person to lead it," he said. "You've already proven how powerful your voice can be." The thought intimidated her, but it also ignited a spark of determination. "If we're going to do this," she said, "it has to be more than just words. It has to be actionable, something that people can take with them into their daily lives." Richard leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Then let's make it happen. The Kindness Initiative." Over the next few months, Kayla and Richard worked tirelessly to bring their vision to life. They called it the Kindness Initiative, a program designed to promote empathy and respect on a global scale. The initiative's mission was simple yet profound: to inspire individuals and organizations to make kindness a core part of their values. The program launched with a powerful campaign titled "Every Seat Has a Story," using video testimonials, social media, and live events, the campaign highlighted real-life stories of kindness, both big and small, from passengers, airline employees, and people from all walks of life. The goal was to remind everyone that behind every face was a unique journey, a story worth hearing. The initiative also included practical components, such as empathy workshops. Open to the public, these workshops taught people how to build connections, communicate effectively, and respond with compassion in challenging situations. Kindness challenges. Monthly challenges encouraged participants to perform acts of kindness, such as writing thank you notes, volunteering, or simply listening to someone who needed to be heard. Partnerships. Kayla reached out to other airlines, hospitality companies, and even schools to adopt the principles of the initiative. By creating a network of organizations committed to kindness, the initiative's impact multiplied. Digital platform. A website and app allowed participants to share their stories, track their acts of kindness, and connect with others around the world who were part of the movement. The impact. The Kindness Initiative quickly gained traction, with media outlets covering its launch and celebrities endorsing its message. But what mattered most to Caleb were the personal stories that began pouring in from participants. A single mother shared how a kind stranger had helped her with groceries after a long day. A teacher described how a student's simple compliment had lifted her spirits during a particularly difficult week. A frequent flyer wrote about how a flight attendant's thoughtful gesture had made his business trips feel less isolating. Each story was a reminder of the profound impact small acts of kindness could have. And while Kayla was thrilled by the success of the initiative, she remained focused on the work still to be done. A full circle moment. One day, as Kayla was preparing for a keynote speech at a global leadership summit, she received an unexpected visitor, Tiffany Lawson. "I heard about the initiative," Tiffany said, her voice steady but emotional. "And I just wanted to thank you for everything. You didn't have to stand up for yourself that day on the plane, but because you did, you've changed so many lives, including mine." Kayla smiled warmly. "You're part of this too, Tiffany. The work you've done to grow and change, that's what this initiative is all about." Tiffany nodded, her eyes glistening. "I've signed up to lead one of the empathy workshops," she said. "It feels like a way to give back, to pay it forward." Kayla felt a surge of pride. The transformation she had hoped for wasn't just happening, it was spreading. Looking ahead, as Kayla took the stage at the summit, she felt a wave of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. The spotlight felt less daunting this time because she knew she wasn't standing alone. Behind her were thousands of people, passengers, employees, and strangers, who believed in the power of kindness. "We started this journey with one simple idea," she began, her voice steady and confident. "That respect and empathy should be at the heart of everything we do. Today, I stand here as proof that small moments of kindness can ripple outward, transforming not just individuals but entire communities. And this is only the beginning." The audience erupted into applause as Kayla stepped back, her heart full. She knew the road ahead would have its challenges, but she also knew that with every act of kindness, they were building something extraordinary, a new horizon where everyone's story mattered. The legacy of empathy. The Kindness Initiative had grown far beyond what Kayla Mitchell had initially envisioned. What began as a response to a single act of disrespect had become a global movement. Kayla now found herself juggling speaking engagements, workshops, and meetings with leaders from various industries, all of whom wanted to incorporate the principles of empathy and respect into their organizations. One morning, as she sat in her home office, Kayla reflected on how far they had come. Her phone buzzed with a text from Amara, the young flight attendant who had sparked the idea of expanding the initiative beyond the airline. "Amara, just wanted to let you know, we had a passenger on my flight yesterday who said she'd signed up for the Kindness Challenge because of one of your speeches. She said it's made her see the world differently. Thank you for inspiring all of us." Kayla smiled, her heart swelling with pride. Moments like these reminded her why she had taken on this challenge in the first place. Yet, even as the initiative thrived, she knew the journey wasn't over. Change wasn't a destination. It was an ongoing process, one that required constant effort and vigilance. The unexpected invitation. Later that day, Kayla received an email from the United Nations. It was an invitation to speak at their annual Global Leadership Forum, an event attended by world leaders, CEOs, and activists. The theme for the year was Building Bridges, Leadership in a Divided World. Kayla hesitated. While she had grown more comfortable with public speaking, the idea of addressing such a high-profile audience was daunting. But as she read through the email again, she realized this was an opportunity to take the message of the Kindness Initiative to an entirely new level. She accepted the invitation, determined to make the most of the platform. The preparation. In the weeks leading up to the forum, Kayla worked tirelessly to craft her speech. She wanted it to be more than just inspirational. She wanted it to challenge the audience to act. She consulted with Richard, Amara, and even Tiffany, whose insights as a transformed flight attendant added depth to the narrative. One evening, as she rehearsed her speech in front of Richard, he stopped her mid-sentence. "You're holding back," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "This isn't just about what you've accomplished. It's about what's still possible. Don't be afraid to dream big." Kayla paused, taking in his words. He was right. The Kindness Initiative wasn't just about addressing individual behavior. It was about creating a ripple effect that could change the fabric of society. She revised her speech that night, pouring her heart into it. The Global Leadership Forum. The day of the forum arrived, and Kayla found herself standing backstage at the UN headquarters, her nerves mingling with excitement. The hall was filled with dignitaries, activists, and visionaries from around the world. As she was introduced, the applause was warm but reserved. The audience didn't yet know the story she was about to share. Kayla stepped onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. She took a deep breath, steadied herself, and began. "Good morning. My name is Kayla Mitchell, and I'm here to tell you a story, not just about what happened to me, but about what it taught me about the world we live in and the world we could create together." She recounted her experience on the flight, the humiliation she felt, and the realization that sparked the Kindness Initiative. She shared stories from employees like Tiffany, who had turned a moment of failure into a journey of growth, and from passengers like Amara's grieving flyer, who had been comforted by a simple gesture of empathy. "What I've learned through this journey," Kayla continued, "is that kindness isn't just a personal virtue. It's a leadership principle. It's the foundation of trust, the fuel for collaboration, and the spark for innovation. In a world that often feels divided, kindness is the bridge that can bring us back together." Her voice grew stronger as she addressed the leaders in the room directly. Imagine a world where every organization, every community, and every individual operates with empathy at their core. What would that world look like? How much conflict could we avoid? How much progress could we make? The room was silent, the weight of her words sinking in. "I'm not here to ask for a donation or a partnership," she said. "I'm here to ask for something much bigger. Your commitment. Commit to making empathy a cornerstone of your leadership. Commit to seeing the humanity in every person you encounter. Because when we lead with kindness, we create a ripple effect that touches lives far beyond our own." Kayla stepped back, her heart pounding as the room erupted into applause. This time, the claps weren't polite. They were thunderous, a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. As she left the stage, several leaders approached her, eager to learn more about the Kindness Initiative and how they could bring its principles to their own organizations. A movement takes flight. The forum was a turning point for the initiative. Following Kayla's speech, global organizations began adopting the Kindness Initiative's framework. Schools implemented empathy curricula, corporations revamped their customer service training, and even governments explored policies that prioritized compassion in public service. Kayla worked tirelessly, traveling to different countries to share the message and train new leaders in empathy-based practices. But she was careful to remain grounded, always remembering that the heart of the initiative lay in small, everyday actions. Full circle. One day, as she prepared for yet another flight, Kayla found herself in a familiar situation, seated quietly in coach, watching the world bustle around her. She smiled at the flight attendant who came by to check on her, a young woman who radiated kindness and professionalism. "Is there anything I can get you, ma'am?" the flight attendant asked. "No, thank you," Kayla replied. "But I just wanted to say, you're doing a wonderful job." The attendant's face lit up, and Kayla felt a wave of gratitude. The interaction was simple, but it embodied everything she had worked for. The culture of respect and empathy that had once felt like a distant dream was now becoming a reality. The legacy. Years later, as Kayla reflected on the journey, she realized that the Kindness Initiative wasn't just a program or a movement, it was a legacy. It was proof that even the smallest moments of disrespect could spark extraordinary change, and that anyone, no matter their role or status, had the power to make the world a better place. Kayla's story became a beacon of hope, a reminder that kindness was not just an ideal but a practice, one that could transform lives, communities, and ultimately, the world. And as she watched the next generation take up the mantle, she knew the skies and the world would never be the same.